Hello. Good morning, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about anthologies. And I want to start out by saying I get a lot of questions about these. I just had someone message me last week asking a few questions because she was asked to join an anthology. And I realized that there are a lot of people out there who do this like as their brand, that they gather people together, men, women, whatever their group is, and they do anthologies. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of background on it because there is a lot of talk around it. There's a lot of people asking questions. So that's what we're going to be doing today, is talking about anthologies. So first of all, you might not have heard the word anthology. An anthology is just a group book. It's something that's curated by one author, or a project manager, basically. So you have like a project lead on this, and they gather authors together and put out the book together. We have done several of these. I did these before I launched Aurora Borealis, so I have some experience on some of them. Mei Ling Chan is one of my authors who's put out anthologies. And we just launched her second one, How to Become, or no, it was Becoming an AAC Leader. We launched that this spring. It's the second in her series of anthologies, and she's doing, I believe, 3 total. So we'll have another one coming out this fall. And what she does for hers is gather together people who are working in the disability space, because what she does is she's a speech language pathologist, and she's working with companies now that a company that handles kind of the it's hard to explain this, the mechanical device that lets someone who is nonverbal actually speak. So the example you always hear is like Stephen Hawking's speaking device. So she works with people in that space. So the type of authors she gathers are in that space because she already has that audience. They're already, able to use that for the good of the book. Another book we've done, I actually participated in this one. This is 21. Get that in front of the camera there. 21. So this was 21 female entrepreneurs, and we were sharing stories of resilience during the pandemic. This one, again, was curated by Kelly Commander. She is a writer. She does a lot of like marketing writing and sort of things. So she has an audience of entrepreneurs. She has an audience of people who own businesses, all of that kind of stuff. So the people she brought together are ones that would be reaching that audience. We have another one coming out in about a week. So a whole bunch of them. Another one coming out actually it's on June 8th, Living Kindly. And this is a bunch of people who have written about kindness in their lives. They've written what we're calling bold conversations on kindness. And I actually was asked to participate in that one too. I'm very honored to be doing that. The person who curated this one, Lee Clark, she has a nonprofit. So it's a little bit different from what you might normally see, but her nonprofit will benefit from proceeds from this book. So knowing all of that, let's dive in and start talking about this, because I know if you've been thinking about running an anthology, or if you're thinking about joining an anthology, you probably have a lot of questions. So most of what I'm giving today is for people who are thinking about joining, but if you want to run an anthology, make sure you pay attention to these questions, because you'll want to have answers to the questions. You'll want to be able to fill in your authors. You'll want to be able to have this in your contracts, whatever you need when you're doing this yourself. So let's start out with question number 1, the biggest question I always get on these, which is, how much should it cost? Is it okay for people to charge for you to be in their anthology? Is it not okay? Is it a scam? I've also gotten that one before. Is it a scam when people are doing that? I saw a conversation that was really disappointing to me as an author and as a as a publisher, in an entrepreneur group, talking about how all these anthologies are a scam. Some are probably a scam, but the vast majority of them are not a scam. Okay. You have to do your research, you have to do your due diligence and make sure that it works for you, that this is something aligned with your business, that this is something that you are going to get something out of. Um, Basically, I want you to look at this as a marketing investment. So if someone approached you and said, "Hey, do you want to buy a billboard in downtown, whatever city you're in? Do you want to buy a billboard and write about, put something up there about your business, and that way you'll get tons and tons and tons of leads." Um, Depends on what your business is. If you're a McDonald's and you're downtown, perfect. If you're a lawyer in the area, perfect. If you are, like in my case, a publisher, something like that is probably not going to do anything for you. So you do have to look at whether this is going to work for your specific business or if it's just not for you. So I don't want you to think that, if somebody puts out there, "Oh, it was a scam, I paid this money and I didn't get anything out of it." Look at what it was. If it was a book talking about childhood trauma and that person isn't in the childhood trauma space, but they jumped in and talked about childhood trauma, and let's say they do websites, that's probably misaligned. So that might be why they thought it was a scam or thought they didn't get their money out of it. Okay, so knowing that stuff, um, here are some things to look at. Is the amount of money that you're putting into it worth it to your business? Think about it that way. I've seen people charge $200. I've seen people charge $1,000. I've seen people do it for free. Um, we're working on a couple anthologies right now that are for nonprofits, and they ask people to join them for free. And that's because they wanted to use those stories to leverage the nonprofit. So those people who shared their stories don't really have, um, an investment other than their time and if they want to market the book themselves. But it's going to do a lot for the nonprofit because they have a collection of stories that bolsters what their message is. So that's something to think about too. Are you helping out a nonprofit? Does it feel good? Does it feel good to you? To me, I wanted to join Living Kindly because I wanted to be a part of this. Her mission is beautiful. She helps people all over the United States. They do all kinds of wonderful giving projects. That to me was worth investing my time, investing a little bit into my marketing for this. And, aside from that, she's one of my clients. So there were a lot of tie ins for me that said, "Hey, this would be good not just for my heart, but for my business." So that was something I weighed because it didn't cost me anything, monetarily, but it costs time, it costs my effort, and it costs, anything that I want to sink into marketing the book personally. Um, some other things you should look at, find out who else is participating. If somebody approaches you and says, "Hey, we're doing an anthology and here are all the people who are participating," or "This is the type of person that we're looking at to participate," see if that aligns with you. If it's people who, for example, aren't at the same level of business as you, or if it's people who really aren't marketing the same niche that you're marketing, then the idea that you have a dozen people, getting the word out about each other's businesses, that might not work for you. In the case of 21, the book we did here, that was a low cost investment for all the authors, and we all have very similar audiences. So the cool thing is with this, we got in front of each other's audiences. It's the same as if you were pitching someone to, be on their podcast. Do you want to be in front of their audience? Cool. Is that going to help their audience, and is it going to help you? That's something you have to think about. Um, Ask up front. If somebody says, "Hey, we're charging X amount for participating in this book," what's covered in that cost? Are they covering the marketing? Are they covering copies of the book? Do you get 10 copies of the book, for example? Are they covering the editing costs, the cost of developing the book? Remember that there are costs that go into that. So, if you turn up your nose at somebody asking you for $500 for participating in the book, back it up a little bit and think about it, because it does cost to pay an editor. It does cost to pay a cover designer. It does cost to pay somebody to do the interior of the book, to publish the book, to market the book. So those are 5 costs just off the top of my head that those dollars could be going toward. I know for 21, some of the things that we looked at was, how we can break out the cost so it can pay for book development and pay for a launch party. Because most of the authors are in the same area, we wanted to have a launch party in the Pittsburgh area so we could bring all our audiences together and buy copies of the book. Okay, so think about those kind of things. Who's the audience? Who's the audience of the curator? And look into who the curator is. If you get approached by somebody who you don't know that well, then definitely look into them. Go to their website, find out who they are and what they do. If there's somebody who is working with a professional, like a publishing company, like how Lee was working with us, then that's something important you'd want to know. Or if there's somebody who has, their own publishing company and they are putting out lots of these anthologies, that's something you want to know too. You might even reach out to people who've been in anthologies before for that person and just gauge what the reception was, gauge how well they did. These are all important things to look into because you want to make sure that you're investing your time and money into something that is going to work for your business, right? So if you have questions, I'm just going to pause here. I know I've been talking and talking and talking. But if you have questions for me while I'm talking about all these topics, make sure you drop them in the comments. If you're watching the replay, put the questions in the comments too, and I will hop on and answer them for you. So I'm going to move on and talk a little bit about the contract, because most of the time you'll be asked to sign a contract if you're sharing your story in one of these books. If you're doing the anthology yourself, you definitely want to develop a contract. And, I always guide my writers, if somebody's in my coaching program or if they're in my editing program, I'll talk to them a little bit about what kind of things to include in the contract. And I always have a sample contract available for my coaching clients to see, because I want to make sure that, the curator and the author are both covered in this. The contract is important. So there are going to be a lot of things that you include just to make sure that everybody's on board, everyone's on the same page. So make sure you read through that contract well to see what your obligations are, what the curator's obligations are, what the publisher's obligations are, because you want to know what you need to do and what you can expect of them. You have to see what's going to be allowed and what's not going to be allowed. So I know some people would tell you, hey, we don't want you to pitch in your story. We don't want you to list your website. If it's something that is for a nonprofit, that's possible. If it's something where you're just sharing stories and it's not business oriented, that's possible. So look into that. And if it doesn't say, and hey, this is my audience, this is something that I really want to connect with them, find out if it's okay if you include your website or your email address or some sort of connection tool so they can come back to you, because that's important too. This is a marketing tool. And I do want to say here too, regardless of whether it says it or not in that contract, it's unethical to use a chapter in another book. So if you've written a book and somebody says, hey, I'd love it if you could participate in my book, don't pull a chapter from your book and give it to them. It's just unethical. And there could be a conflict in the contracts. There could be a conflict with your publisher if you've put it out with a publisher. So make sure you don't do that. Yes, you can use a lot of the same ideas. Yes, if you have a process that you use. We've had authors before who are like, hey, this is my process and I talk about it pretty much the same in every book. That stuff is fine. That's something you talk about all the time. You're probably going to say just about the same thing about it, but it is unethical to just take a whole chapter and copy it out. So make sure you know that. And make sure too that you don't take, that chapter after the book is published and pull it out and like give it to people for free. That's not okay either. So just a couple ethical things there. Um, as far as book sales, so I want to move on to that in the contract because that's going to be something that you'll want to know about. Um, you'll usually see something in that contract about book sales, and you want to find out like where is the book available. If they're just doing like one printing and they're giving all the authors copies of the book, that's something you need to know because you want to make sure you have enough copies to sell, you know, down the road. Um, the printer that we use does print on demand, so that's not a concern for our authors. But it could be a concern for some authors because I know some authors use a special printer that just does like one printing, and that's however many books you get. Um, so make sure you find out about that. And I did have somebody mention they wanted to make sure that you guys know that most authors in anthologies are not compensated for sales on Amazon. So just know that it can get very complicated with that, especially if the curator has a lot of books that they're putting out, if they do a lot of anthologies. So usually you're not going to get any of the royalties from Amazon if your book's available on there. But conversely, you can usually get your books and sell them for whatever cost you want, unless there's something in that contract that says you have to sell your book for $18.99 or whatever, or if there's something on the back of the book that says how much the book costs. So you do want to watch that sort of thing, and that's a lot of times how authors in anthologies will make their money. So for like, I'm going to just keep using this example because we just put this one out. For 21, what we did was we decided to have the one event, the one book event in Pittsburgh, and that's going to be coming up later this year, so watch for that. So we're going to do one event, and no matter which authors are able to show up, we're taking all the proceeds from that event and splitting it among the authors because all the authors put into that launch event. So we want to make sure that we all got out of it too. We have authors in different states. Obviously, they're more than likely not going to fly in for this, but they will benefit from it too. They put in their money and they will all benefit from that. So we are not selling books individually as authors at that event. We will have one table, one person collecting all the money, one person will be splitting it all up. So that's one thing that you could do, you know, if you have an anthology with a bunch of people who are local. Another thing you can do is when you're doing events on your own, make sure that you have those books there with you so you can get, you know, whatever royalties from that book. So if you sell a book, let's say you pay $5, the author price. Monkey agrees. Monkey always agrees with me. Monkey agrees. So if you have, let me back this up a little bit. So there's, for example, through my company, the authors can purchase books whenever they need them. And the price usually ranges about $3 to $5. Sometimes larger books are closer to $6. So if you have a book for, you know, $5, let's say that,
by the way, we saved a baby bird.
We did. We saved another baby bird.
It's in an egg right now, and it's in our kitchen.
Yeah, we're gonna try to put it back in the nest outside. We wanted to keep it warm last night.
We'll have to raise that baby bird.
I don't think we're raising a baby bird.
I want to. I want to feed it worms because I can pick them up and just like, here you go.
Thank you for sharing that. So if you purchase a book for $5, let's say that, say you set an order for 20 books, $5 a piece, so that comes to $100. So you've put $100 into your books at the author price. When you take those books to your book event, you can then sell them, let's say, for $20. So for 4 times that amount. So you'll bring in 400. So then you'll end up making $300 off of that book. Just as a very brief example. So keep in mind that that's one way that you can be getting money back from your book. Another way is to be selling it off of your website and be pushing people there, driving sales there. And again, it would work the same way. You would have to order the books yourself. keep them at your house, and sell the books that way. If you're linking them to Amazon, they're going to Amazon to buy the book, and then the royalties go back to the curator. Again, this is in most cases, but check with the person doing the book to see what that's like. I'm not seeing any questions yet. So if you do have questions, drop them in the comments. If not, I am going to keep rolling on through here. One of the things that Kelly did mention when we were talking about this was that the schedule was essential. And that is for both the curator and the author. So she was curating the book, and her comment was that keeping on that schedule, having a timeline for the book, was so essential for her to keep moving through and to make sure that everything was on pace. As an author from that book, I will say that it's very important to make sure you get your chapter in on time, get your edits in on time, get your bio in on time, all of that stuff, because if you don't, you're risking pushing up against the deadline. And also, most people who are working on these books, especially if they're doing a lot of anthologies, they'll cut, I was going to say they will cut you, they will cut your story. They will not cut you. If you're worried about that, then you really need to consider not being in the anthology. But they might cut your story, and there could be a clause in the contract about that. So you could lose money on it. Make sure you get everything in on time. Make sure it's what has been asked for. So I did want to talk about that in the next section here about writing. I've got a hair. Make sure that you're getting in what the curator asks for on time. Some curators will give you an outline. Some will just give you a topic. Some will just give you a word count. Make sure you find out all of those kind of things. I participated in a book a few years ago, did not get published, but I was asked to, quote, contribute a chapter. And I thought, cool, a chapter. How long is a chapter? I had been writing fiction, so to me, a chapter was like 10 pages. So I wrote like 8 or 10 pages and turned it in. I was the only one who did that. Everyone else contributed anywhere from 500 words to about 3,000 words. So it was a very wide range of stories that was gathered for this book, which was part of the reason why it ended up not being published, because the curator just didn't have the knowledge for handling all of this kind of stuff and making sure it was aligned and telling them, hey, this is what we're looking for in the book. We're not looking for all these sad stories. We want you to talk about XYZ and make sure you end it on a positive note. So know what you're getting into, know what the curator wants, check in on that kind of stuff. It definitely helps if the curator is somebody who's working with a publisher, working with a coach, working with somebody on that if they haven't had experience. And just be aware that the curator or an editor may ask you for tweaks, additions, adjustments after you've turned in your chapter. That's something that we did on 21 because we want it to be the best book possible, right? So some of the chapters came back, and a couple of them weren't as focused on the year 2020 as we really wanted them to be. So we just said, hey, expand on this. We really want to hear more about this. Or if they didn't talk enough about their business, talk more about your business. Talk more about how this happened in 2020. And the stories that came back were awesome. So if you are curating, don't be afraid to say, hey, this is really what we're looking for. Is there any way you can tweak this? If you're working on your book, don't be afraid to accept those tweaks. Don't be afraid to accept those changes. Don't be afraid to get, critique on your book. I'm not saying criticism. Criticism is not good. Critique. Critique is, hey, we'd love to see this. Critique should come from a positive place. So be aware that that's going to happen. And again, when you're writing this book, or when you're writing your chapter rather, think about the goal of the book. Think about what it's going to do for you, because you want to also, make sure that you're, seeding the next steps with you. So if it's something that, let's say a business book like 21, Make sure that you're putting stuff in there that's going to intrigue the reader, that's going to make them say, oh, that's somebody I want to work with. That's somebody I need to find out more about. That's somebody I need to connect with. I want to follow her Instagram, whatever it is. That's the kind of stuff that you want to be putting in there, seeding that next step. Again, as long as it fits with the book, but that goes clear back to the beginning on, does this book work for my brand? Okay. Moving on, we're going to talk for a minute about royalties. Um, we briefly mentioned royalties. Make sure you find out about this. Make sure you find out how this is working. Make sure you find out if taxes are taken out. Make sure you do take taxes out of the book sales that you personally make, because that is income considered for your business. So I just wanted to drop that in there too. Monkey says, hey. Monkey loves books too, by the way. Yes. Copies of the book. Find out if copies of the book are included in the cost, if additional copies are available, how you obtain additional copies, if you have to, submit your order 2 weeks in advance or 3 weeks in advance or 6 months in advance or whatever it is, because you want to know when you're going to be able to get those for your next event. Is it a single printing? Is it print on demand? All of that kind of stuff is important. And you do want to find out where copies are going to be sold to. So if you are a local author, like that's your niche, your local, you have a local brand, you want to know, hey, they're going to be sold at a local bookstore or a local clothing boutique, or there's a business, let's say there's a business coach who has like a storefront, and people come in there to work with them on branding or websites or whatever it is. Books are going to be sold there. Those are things you want to know. Where are royalties going from those sales? All good stuff to ask. Finally, I want to wrap this up. I know we've been on here almost half an hour, but I do want to talk about marketing, because this is imperative too. You want to know how marketing for that book is going to be handled. Because if it's just somebody saying, hey, I want to gather a bunch of authors together, I just want us all to write a book, then that might not be a good thing for your brand. That might be something that's, a bunch of people who are excited to become authors, but then they're not going to do anything with that book. So you do want to find out, is there marketing behind this book? Is the money that I'm paying into this book going toward marketing? Are we doing a bestseller campaign? Are we getting a Kirkus review? Are we doing, a partnership with people who are using this for their courses? What kind of marketing is going on with this book? And how can I, as an author in this book, handle my marketing? Usually people are willing to at least give you some sort of tips on marketing the book, especially if somebody has worked on a book before. They may say, hey, you need to reach out to someone with PR. That's fine too, because not everybody handles marketing, but that's something you need to know up front. What is the author supposed to handle with marketing? Am I expected to handle all my marketing? A book like 21, where it was a very low cost to invest, that's where we rely more on the authors doing their own, because we want the authors to make the royalties off the book with their own sales. So it was a low cost investment, and then everybody is handling their marketing mostly on their own. We did the bestseller campaign to get everything kicked off and get a lot of noise around it, but each of the authors is handling it however they see fit. And what happens after the book launches? Some people will do the book, do the bestseller campaign, and that's it. Are people going to be marketing this book? Is this going to be available on everyone's websites? Those are the kind of questions you want to look into. If it's something where somebody just puts out one book, oh, my light went off. I think it's time to wrap up, since I only have my lamp on now. But those are some of the things you will look at. Will there be assistance from the publisher? Is the publisher handling promo? Are they handling promo beyond the launch? Is this something where it's with a publishing company that's going to be reaching out and getting distribution into Target and Walmart, things like that. All important stuff to ask. So that being said, yes, I know that was a lot. Yes, you can rewatch the video if you need to take notes. I'm going to jump into the comments now because I see some questions. So Allison says, let's say you have an anthology idea of about 100 pages with 10 contributors. Okay. Can you give an approximate timeline from idea to execution given those parameters? I know there are a ton of factors, how much information they have collected, how many contributing authors, how long the book is, editing, publishing. You're known for helping writers put out polished and professional books quickly with your Spark method. Thank you, Allison, and thank you for being one of my editors too, because without you, that would be a lot harder. So I want to say, just for the example you gave, 100 pages, 10 contributors, it's pretty doable. I would say a long, playing the long game, 6 months is doable. I would say 4 months is still doable. 3 is tight, just because if you're reaching out to people who don't have that like as their goal for this year, it might be hard to organize all those authors, get them the information, make sure you, as the curator, if you're, let's say Allison is curating a book, if she's working with 10 authors and making sure that all their stuff comes in on time, as the curator, she will want to read through it too, just to make sure that everybody got what she has for the vision. So the curator has a vision for the book. So you want to make sure that you allow for that. So I would say if you allowed like 6 weeks for your contributors to, do their write-ups, allow 6 weeks, have it get into you, give a couple weeks for you to review and get stuff back, get tweaks. You could probably send it off to the editor, soon after that. Editor, cover, I usually say 4 to 6 weeks on editor because sometimes I don't have one available. Sometimes it ends up with a lot of questions, or we need to go through the editor to the curator and back to one of the authors because there's something that we really need to ask the author about. So sometimes there is a little bit more back and forth, a little dance, when you're working on this kind of a book. So I would say the shortest you want to do that is like 4 months. So let me know if that answered your question or if you have other questions about that. Hello, Kelly. Thank you for joining us. Darlene says, do you get the author rate for purchasing books if you're just a participant, or do you have to be the curator? That is up to the curator. So the books that are going out through my publishing house, I would say most of the time, people are going to get the author rate. Sometimes the curator will add a fee on top of that just because you're having to message them, they're having to do the orders, all of that. So if they're adding a fee on top of that, I don't see that as a problem. But most curators will say, hey, just reach out and place your order. That would be up to the curator, up to their team, what's going on. Just make sure that that's all ironed out in your initial conversation with them. Yeah, Allison says the back and forth between curator and contributors is an important piece of the timeline. Yes, it is. We've had a couple where we had to reach out to an author a couple times because they, like one of the examples I'm thinking of, they had written something a certain way and it really sounded like something nefarious had happened, but really they were just trying to write it in a neutral way. But writing it neutrally made me automatically jump to like, oh, they're trying not to say that this horrible thing happened. So we had to reach out and kind of go back and forth and say, hey, is there a different way we can say this, or not include it, because we don't want people to jump to conclusions. We want it to be pretty clear, and that's honestly one of the big things about working with an editor is you want it to be clear. You want there to be no question in the reader's mind. So yeah, so some of that happens. Yeah, so again, thank you for joining me, everyone. If I do see more questions throughout the day, I will get to them. Um, yeah, so yeah, I know Kelly said she just hopped on like 2 minutes ago, but welcome, and I'm heading out. I'm gonna grab lunch and I will check back in later and answer any more questions. So I hope I got everything that you've been wanting to know about anthologies, curating them, participating in them, all that fun stuff. Um, yeah, Kelly says, Darlene, if you follow the guidelines Corey provides, you can get an anthology out in 4 to 6 months. That was the example I was thinking of in my head because we did that with 21. Because at that point, my coaching program was a 3 month program. So we did 3 months of coaching, working on project management, looking at the chapters that Kelly contributed, because that's part of the package is, reviewing some of her work. And then also, if there was a question about, one of the authors, hey, can you look at this, that kind of stuff. So that's the stuff we worked on for the first 3 months. And then we left month 4 for editing, formatting, all that good stuff. And, along the way, the cover came in and the cover's gorgeous. 3 cheers for Karen Capitoline because she does gorgeous covers for us. Um, yeah, so all of that came to be in about 4 months. So if you have other questions, drop them in the comments, and thank you for joining me today.